Well, good evening. It has been a while since I posted my last video. Um, I also said, like in this last video, that I would publish my like a philosophical essay, which I had been writing in like 2 weeks from that video onwards, which didn't happen, unfortunately, and I'm still busy working on it. It took some time longer than I had expected, but yes, I have now, of course, sort of made up my mind in a certain sense. I have a clearer overview, clearer perception of it all, and because of that, I thought it would be a good idea to do this video. The Because, like in the essay, I talk about, repeatedly refer to a sort of a philosophical concept, which I came up with, but which is a bit technical. So I also would like in this video not necessarily to have it to go into the technicalities of everything. So like the point is that I'm really going to explain it, what I mean by that concept, and one of those concepts is sort of what I call, at least, ad infinitum representation of absence. And ad infinitum, that's a Latin word that's often being used in philosophical discourse in order to refer to infinity. Like it literally translates from Latin to English to infinity. Ad infinitum to infinity. And so this concept is ad infinitum representation of absence. And the representation, I mean in like a sense of the presentation of something, but then repeatedly. So representing, actually. That's the sense in which I use representation. And this representation is thus of absence. And this is really like the vital part, actually, of my essay. I will not go further into the essay, because I think that if you've managed to click on this video by now, I hope you're still watching actually by now, by 4 minutes. Probably you either already thought that this is already way too wordy. Actually, I can imagine that, but I'm now going to make it less wordy by explaining what I mean by this. So I hope to have been able to capture your attention by this very boring philosophical concept, ad infinitum representation of absence. But what this refers to is just basically, that's why I've called this video a satsang, because not everyone is familiar with the term. I guess who will click on this video, I'm not sure. Some will, but a satsang is like a term in Eastern philosophy, in which like Hindus or seers, you can call them all sorts of names, yogis, whatever, those type of people, at least, in which they come together with students of theirs, and they're going to sort of do the same thing that Socrates did. Socrates did actually in ancient Greece, and that is like to just to contemplate consciousness really, and self, the concept of self. So what it means to what the self refers to. What is the self? What is the nature of the self? That is what satsang is. So a gathering of people to contemplate concepts like self and consciousness, as in essence like the ad infinitum representation of absence. Like if you, of course, I said I would try to make it less wordy, but nevertheless I'm going to explain it, right? So nevertheless, it is philosophical in nature, and that is what makes it a little bit different from like a sort of traditional satsang. So the satsang that I just explained, because in a satsang, which I'm going to do in a minute, by the way, still, but you're not doing what I'm now going to demonstrate, and that is like that I've already been doing for a while actually, and that is like really having all these terms sort of in front of your mind's eye, right? In your imagination, in your thought, whatever you may call it. These structures that you're intuiting, whatever. So you're really having, you have these sort of categories, and you have a sort of continuity in the sort of storyline that you want to tell, right? That is what I've done by now. And that's not what a satsang is. That's not what they do in satsang. Because what they do in satsang is they contemplate consciousness. And so you really begin by what is consciousness? Or actually in my case, in the case of this video, what is ad infinitum representation of absence? I find it funny to say that. I don't know, but so what is that? Like the thing is that like a concept of consciousness or the self, that is like you have like that's sort of those are two elementary concepts, right? Quite fundamental or sort of commonsensical also, in a sense. So everyone has a sort of idea what they are, right? So in case of the self, or what consciousness is. Consciousness is like absolutely the most basic thing, right? The most commonsensical thing, like the fact that I am conscious now, right? That I'm aware of something, that I can perceive, that I, if I touch my finger in this way, that I can feel that, right? That is consciousness. But like this term that I posit, the ad infinitum representation of absence, that's like probably you've never heard that term, and it is to me to explicate it, right? To explain it, and in philosophy, it really does make sense. It really has a purpose. It really has a function, and that is going to be explicated now. Because like I could also have said, like basically I'm referring to consciousness by means of that term, but I'm referring also, and that is like the more philosophical part to it, which it also sort of makes it distinct from the satsang, the traditional satsang, because I also I developed it in order in sort of in a study of a language, of speech, and of writing. Like that is not what you're going. That is not those three study objects are not study objects of satsang, as I've just uh, explained, right? And if you assume that what I say is true, you can search it up. um, yeah, but so the basic element of the basic the fundamental study object of the topics of language, writing, and speech, basically, of course, are letters and words, right? Uh, now, I do not present you with letters, I do not present you sentences, but I do present you speech, right? Uh, yeah, so the study object in that case is like really sound, right? The things that you hear. What are those things? What are those words, right? And like it's actually pretty cool. I think. I think that all is find it pretty boring easily, quite quickly. But like, if you really going to sort of study what words are, it's like they began to do that in like they made a scientific endeavor of it in like mid half of the past century, I think. Chomsky was it, but that name you can forget if you're not familiar with it and if you don't care. um, but it has really become a scientific discipline. So we could say roughly that it is already studying what words are for 100 years, and that's easily sort of demonstrated by me asking you, the watcher, the my audience, if you hear my words and if you hear those sounds and stuff, like what is really a word, right? If you can follow me. uh, like you really need to measure words, so that happens by writing them down or recording them, right? In order to be able to cut in them and do that repeatedly over several studies in order to see really what makes this word different, or what makes this supposed hypothetical word different from the other supposed hypothetical word. And by studying that, you see that it's not as easy as you thought, as is always the case with science. And then you're ending up studying this word for like 70 or 100 years. That's a little tangent that I went on, but nevertheless interesting, I think. I hope. Yeah, so my study objects, were words really and letters. So as I just explained, that you can't really study words if you don't write really or record. But in case of philosophy, doing philosophy, you can assume, and I think that many of you will really find this quite commonsensical or easy to grasp, that if in case of philosophy you're really studying letters in essence. So a letter, so like a T, I cannot like the T, right? And now it's not it's not how I you know what I mean. I should actually have a PowerPoint presentation or something in which you can draw it, but it doesn't matter. The T, you know what I'm talking about. There's not the T. There's not this T, right? There's not this T, the sound. That's called a phoneme. That's what linguistics. That's the scientific discipline of which I've just talked about in the tangent. has called these fundamental parts or elements of sound, of speech. Those are phonemes. So the yeah, I'm not really sure. Actually, I think it are letters really. In essence, no. Look, this is more concrete. This is actually the case. This is actually what they have studied. So you have cell, the word cell, and you have the word set. Cell in case of CELL, and set in case of SETT. Yeah, not two T's, one T. Like cell and set, they sound the same except from the sort of the letter, the last part, right? So there you have different sounds, cell and set. So the T, the T actually, and the you know what I mean, the L. And that is really what distinguishes also those words, right? And really what makes them meaningful. So yeah, that's quite easy to grasp, I think. But that's called a phoneme. I'm really going into the technicalities, which I said I wouldn't do, but here we are. Yeah, so this study of mine basically ended there. So, okay, we know if I hear cell instead of set, that is really what makes me think of, in the former case, respectively, a in compartment, right, and or a prison, right, and in the latter case, a it has different meanings, right? But for instance, it makes me think of it has like set as like a really abstract connotation, and there's sort of a less abstract with a more figurative connotation that is like the I don't know, the artist that's the DJ that is going to do his set, right? It doesn't really matter what comes in your what comes up in your head, in my audience head. That's also perfectly fine, right? But yeah, that is really what makes what makes the meaning sort of exist, to just call it without too much technicalities. So that's really what makes you think of, what makes you imagine a cell as opposed to a set, right? So now you know that. I hope you are still watching. Yeah, but if you sort of take a step back again from meaning, so the imagination, so the imagined cell and the imagined set, so respectively the prison and the DJ set. If you take a step back from that and observe that, you shine your consciousness on those things, you perceive those things. What is it really, in case of speech yet again, so cell and set, just those words, what is it really that makes it sort of possible to to understand what I am saying when I say set instead of sell, because like I could also have just uttered whatever another word, right? Actually, it doesn't actually really not it doesn't really actually matter if I oppose set to sell or set to tree. uh, Assuming that you've understood everything that I've said until so far. You see? So what is it really? And now we're really going to do the satsang. You see? Now we're really contemplating sort of consciousness, but then with a study object. So like Eastern satsang would do it like would attach consciousness to self, the concept of self. So and then do a similar thing as me. Not really. It's just different in the aspect, in the sense that I described in the beginning. But it nevertheless attaches consciousness to a concept like self, and then it tries to see what the self is, and that has a really good purpose, and I see why they're doing that. And like, if I say that in those words, that's really an understatement, but doesn't matter for now. Now we have the study object, speech, just in general. So we're attaching consciousness to speech, to these words that I'm uttering, right? Like, be conscious of those words, of the words that I'm uttering. So what is it with the words that I'm uttering that makes me what is it that what is that which makes me clarify myself? You see? If I posit that question, I think you could easily see that it are not phonemes, or it are not those sounds, right? So not those particular sounds as I've just explicated. So the L in case of cell and the T in case of set, right? And so it is not sort of the immanent or inherent operating structure of language. It is not. So in other words, it is not grammar. It is not syntactics, because that which makes me clarify myself has already sort of assumed that my audience is also not disabled and has a brain that just works and does know grammar in case of English, right? Does know the English language and does know English words and does know, if you know English writing, so words and stuff, you also know the speech, or like, that's clear by now, I think. So what is that which clarifies myself? Which is an interesting question. What is that which makes me clarify myself without going into concepts like self? What is that which clarifies? Taking a little sip in the meantime. So it is not grammar and stuff, because that is presupposed in just using language, right? If I want to make myself clear, I can only do that if I point myself towards a certain audience, a particular audience, so an English speaking audience in this case. And so I assume that they know the English language, as I've just said. Yeah, so what is it really beyond that? You see where I'm aiming at? Yeah, like, and here we come at ad infinitum. Sorry, I really need to practice that. Ad infinitum representation of absence, because what I'm doing is like, I'm sort of explaining how actually we in science have thought would make up what would have made up language, so grammar and syntactics in essence, is not the truth basically of that which clarifies myself, that which makes me clarify myself. Sorry. You see, I'm already doing it. It's like sort of, you already see that it is in fact actually related to self, to agency, really, because I am making myself clear, right? But okay, let's not go into that tangent. I was going to explain the ad infinitum representation of absence, because if we assume that what I've said is true, right? So that language is not obtained, is not created by these things what we call phonemes and morphemes, and there are a lot of other technical words for those things. But it is just really more elementary. It is just the basic consciousness of speech, of sound. It is, I should say speech, because of course if I now put on a piece of Chopin, like a musical piece, that is not speech, right? It's just piano. So I should say speech. But you see that you can't really, if you're at this point, you can't really go beyond that unless you're yet again creating a scientific endeavor, which I propose in my essay, but however grounded in ad infinitum representation of absence, because as it is clear by now, what you're doing with language is that actually you're clarifying yourself, you're making yourself understandable, and what is that which is making yourself understandable? It is yourself, and you cannot go beyond that, right? We have no words for that yet. We have no words to describe that yet, actually, at this point, scientifically, philosophically, nowhere actually. It is uncanonical, it is unlogical, it is unreasonable, it is metaphonetic. You see? So it really stops there. It really stops there. And that is the absence, right? it is basically just falling still. Just, okay, this is it, right? That is the understanding. Like, if I'm sort of trying to explain some idea I have to another, sort of the idea is another idea, but that idea is that, like, we have sort of reached a mutual understanding. So he, assuming that it is he, the other subject, has understood me, what I'm trying to say, of at least to some degree, right? Some tangible degree, when that person, that subject, has sort of stopped asking questions and stuff, right? And it is really that moment of insight, really, that moment of understanding, that you fall still. It's like sort of, right? And sort of when you're trying to when you're going to speak up and sort of you fall still because you've lost your train of thought, for instance, the moment that your thought comes back, it really is sort of, it hits you really, like, and then you know what you're going to say. But before that, you're just still. That's the absence of sound, of absence of speech. It is stillness, really. And so, basically, given that you can, what I say is sort of true, but universally true, because you can just say this for whatever word, also whatever a word that is going to make up that so supposedly has a better grasp scientifically of what it really is, when I'm making myself clear, or even philosophically. Just new, in other words, just new words. I'm not going to describe that. You see, and that's the universal truth of it. That's the stillness. It is just the mere fact, the mere sort of universal characteristic of language, that you're always falling still sometimes, like now. And then, yet again, I want to say something, and then the stillness is interrupted, and then I fall still again, right? So that representation of absence, of speech, of sound, is ad infinitum, is to infinity. And that is really the nature of not necessarily consciousness, because consciousness also, it is just consciousness of whatever, right? So whatever a sensory perception, whatever a thought, whatever a feeling, it is just consciousness of whatever. Consciousness of a storyline in a film, consciousness of a piece of music, right? It is just consciousness. But understanding, that's a different matter, right? That, like, from a sort of philosophical perspective, actually. Like, you could say that I understand. Yeah, it is not really like, look. It is not really that just by me being conscious of, like I'm seeing myself now on the screen when I'm recording this. It is not that by me being conscious of myself that I understand myself. That's not. in a certain sense it is, but it is more. Yeah, I see that this is like a sort of, you just need to assume that what I say is true at this point. But no, I think that intuitively you can grasp that, right? That if that I do not necessarily, or let's say, just sort of canonically, scientifically and philosophically, um, including both Eastern philosophy as Western philosophy, we say that when we use the term understanding, we actually refer to sort of more. Um, I don't know. You can also have psychoanalysis, shadow work. I don't know. Right? It's also sort of layers of understanding yourself, your personality, your persona, your ego, all those things, right? So also it also really obtains for Eastern philosophy, like if you're going through ego stuff and you're trying to become aware of your ego, or you're becoming aware of your ego, that is also really becoming aware of yourself, because ego is self, right? Not the self that Eastern philosophy points towards necessarily. Also, although also, yeah, those different philosophies have different terminologies and stuff, but that doesn't really matter. If you know where I'm talking about, you know that you know where I'm talking about. Otherwise, you can just search it up, and everything that I've just said is true. So now we're again falling still. And that is really, so, like, if you're on board with me and with my train of thought, and you, yeah, like I've explained that in satsang. Yeah, this is not really of your concern if you not have done satsang or anything actually, but I'm nevertheless going to explain it for the ones that do have done that. So, in case of you're having done some satsang, yeah, it's, in a sense it's also just really a meditation, but then with someone in front of you guiding you. That's really what satsang is, more plainly actually. Like now, this. Mm, yeah, but if you assume this, that satsang is this uh, contemplation of self, uh, through means of just, yeah, being conscious. Basically, it's way more than that, but it is just in order for me to make my following point, and that is that if you assume that, then also in satsang you see that, because you also see in satsang that they use words and language and stuff, right? That in essence, what they're doing in satsang is also ad infinitum representation of absence, really. It is really me now falling still, yet again, because I've said that, right? So, yeah, that is satsang. That is a satsang of ad infinitum representation of absence. It's just the it is just me pointing my audience towards that stillness, and that stillness you can also be aware of if I'm speaking somewhat more slowly, with longer pauses in between my words. And why I'm not going to do this for very long. Okay, I will stop now. But why is that stillness really of interest to you? Well, first of all, because what I've just explained, it is the understanding. It is that which underlies fundamentally, universally, always, in every case thinkable, always, in every culture that you become, uh, everywhere around the globe, on any alien planets, in oceans. No, I don't know, but it is true that if animals use speech, it's true what I'm saying. That it is just it's all grounded in being still. Actually, it is actually not about the words. You see. So that is how every life thinkable makes itself known to you. In other words, it is fundamentally, universally equal. Yeah, just universally, whatever you want. It is just true that ad infinitum representation of absence is life itself. Stillness is life itself. So that stillness, just an unconsciousness, just the really the absence of words, really, you see, that is life. Yes, no, because really to sound funny, if I'm thinking about, if you're not able to follow me anymore, but it's not that difficult what I've said until so far, I think. So I think you should be able to follow me, at least quite intuitively. Um, yeah, so in other words, if you're thinking a lot, like me and doing philosophy, you're not living. That's the sad truth. No, I will not go into that too much, but it is really true that like being still is life, right? This is life. So if you're constantly sort of having the weight of the world on on your shoulders, right? So the I don't know, geopolitics, the tensions between the European Union, America, and Russia, and you have the wars on your mind of Ukraine and Russia, and in Palestine, Iran and Israel, right? In that case you literally have death on your mind, but I don't know also if you're thinking about tomorrow, really. So, and if you're thinking, you're really searching for an explanation, right? And an explanation is in words, as I have explained. That's true. That's commonsensically true. So if you're thinking about tomorrow, you're not living, and certainly you're not living tomorrow, right? Like, all there ever exists is this. like if you're juxtaposing, if you're contrasting it to thoughts about tomorrow, the future, yesterday, the past, you could say that all there ever is the now. And there are a lot of Eastern philosophies and spiritual teachings who say that, which is true, of course. But you could also say that, just more generally, as I've just explicated, it is really life. It and that is where, yeah, Eastern philosophers, mostly, because this is not really a thing in Western philosophy, where Eastern philosophers thus say that this is life. Sorry, consciousness. I mean, so yeah, you yet again just need to assume that what I say is true. This is really only actually really relevant or interesting for the ones that are into Eastern philosophy. But so I've explained that it is equal to life. So what is life? What is life? It is just here, now, right? It is me being able to feel my hand. It is me being able to be aware of myself in the camera or on the screen. It is me being able to be aware of that scarf over there, right? That is life. And we could go somewhat deeper even, because what I say about this sort of universal axiom of or principle of ad infinitum representation of absence, ad infinitum representation of absence is not only true in case of language, speech. It is thus also true in case of writing, given that writing in essence is speech, or that the two are so closely related that to think anything otherwise is just very difficult, at least. But yeah, in my essay I actually say that that writing is really actually speech, because here this is the important point actually. If you're reading, and this is really what you need to demonstrate to yourself, sort of scientifically, if you will, even, that if you're reading, if you're really aware, you will become aware that what you're saying, what you're reading, is being repeated in a voice inside of your head, and you need to be really conscious of that. But that is what happens, really. In the same way, you have like this sort of in your working memory, you have this loop sometimes of sound, just sort of, for instance, a song that just repeats itself. There is really a mechanism in the brain that just repeats things, right? Represents things, and thinkably so, to infinity, ad infinitum. And also thus, in case of, in essence, the absence actually of speech, given that it is true, assuming that it is true what I've just said about that it is a scientific or empirical observation, that it is always the case that you're having a voice repeating what you're reading. But you need to demonstrate it for yourself, really. I cannot demonstrate that, obviously. I have not your voice inside of my head, luckily. Yeah, I was going, by the way, to we were going somewhat deeper because like the ad infinitum representation of absence. Um, if you yeah, look, this one is fun. It might expand your consciousness dramatically. Caution. No, I don't know, but like I'm going to show in this way, because like if I put my hands like up in the air, there is, and just gradually, right? Now I see it, and I see it now, and then there's a point at which I don't see it anymore, right? So now I don't see my hand anymore, but you can guys can see it, right? So okay, now I can see it also, but now I cannot see it and you can. But the idea is, of course, that like there is an like my field of awareness is it goes somewhere like this. You see? Like the things above there I'm not aware of, basically, in the same way as I'm never not aware of what's behind me, right? Like I can feel, if I do this, my chair here, that it is, or supposedly that it is my chair. If I'm just relying on how this feels, I wouldn't know what the fuck actually I'm laying on, right? But I know by looking here that it is a tree that I'm sitting on, so a tree, a chair. Then I know that it is in a chair that I'm sitting on, and of course I'm also looking at the screen and seeing myself sitting in a chair. But besides feelings that I can have if I make a sort of contact with the back of my head with something that's behind of me, I visually cannot see what's behind me, and I need to direct my head this way, otherwise I just can't see, right? And in addition, in the same way, there's also like now I've hopefully had your attention to such a degree in relation or with respect to what I was saying, what I was explaining. You probably have not been attending. I don't know, what have you not been attending? I don't know, this part here. Wait, what's this? How can I? You have probably not attended this, really, right? This thing. I don't know what's called in English, but that thing. It's like part of the window. You haven't really been attending all the time. Yeah, or that's scarf, but I can imagine that some of you have. But yeah, you get the idea, right? Or probably, perhaps you haven't seen all the time. There was actually a yeah, what do you call it? Ventilator in Dutch, in my screen, or that I had like a thing with all my laundry. You can't really be aware that this. You probably wasn't aware that had not been aware yet that that thing there was my laundry, right? I'm making it a bit more difficult than this, but you get the idea, right? There are just lots of things that you're actually not aware of all the time, right? And for me, for instance, like I've put so much of my attention during now 54 minutes already on me explaining things and stuff, right? That I've or during all the time I've sort of filtered down. That just happens unconsciously in your brain, right? The noise that comes from the street, actually, I can hear it now, but all that time I didn't hear it, right? So, in other words, all those things that I've just sort of pointed out to you were all the time nothing. They were absent, right? Like, somewhat perhaps more strikingly, also for in case of this I find really striking, but I hope you can follow me now in that sort of realization. But like, imagine just like this famous story of Newton, right? Sitting beneath a tree and having an apple fall on his head, right? and at that moment he realizes, oh, there is gravity, right? The idea is this, in respect to what I'm pointing out towards you, that before that time, there people did not know of gravity. Like, of course they knew that they could not fly, right? Of course they knew that, right? Sort of common sensely of intuitively, but they had not they did not have the basically in essence it's really the theoretical understanding, but or the theoretical grasp, philosophical, physical, theoretical grasp, whatever. They did not have that idea really. So, like, yeah, and I I I cannot. This is the strange thing. I cannot explain why that is that insight is like sort of so revolutionary and striking really, because then I should now be able, for you guys, for my audience, to make such a discovery in order to explain that, because all the things that I've just made aware to you, right, and pointed out towards you, it is really because we, in just like the last couple of 100 years really, we began to study psychology and stuff. We began to be aware that we are not aware all the time, that there are just so much things that we are not aware of, right? Yeah, here you can really hopefully understand what I'm saying, because before there was not that psychological understanding, that theoretical grasp of those subliminal perceptions and unconsciousness really, like in a psychoanalytic sense, like the unconsciousness of Jung and Freud. Before that time they just did not know that, right? Like perhaps in case of the unconsciousness in the sense of Jung really, they for instance had, I don't know, they were some intuitives. Jung really works with personality types and says that intuitives are really symbolic and imaginary. So, like, that's why I say, for instance, you can imagine that an intuitive like me can have had, before they knew of the unconscious in the Jungian sense, the intuitive assuming that it existed, and it did. Otherwise, everything that I've just said is false, and that's just not true. um, the intuitive thus had already access, of course, to these sort of, in the Jungian sense, strictly speaking, then, the images, right? Sort of the crazy analogies that come to his head, come to his mind. For instance, when he's sick or something, that's a sort of the paradigmatic idea, example of Jung's intuitive. That you can search it up. In some interview, one of the only interviews I know, he said that that the intuitive, this is really like a sort of folk psychological thing. This it's in the sense that it's that many know of this, and that's all. But the intuitive, the intuitive who goes on tangents and tangents and tangents and cannot really come to his point. he he is like he was all the time before the unconsciousness unconscious existed, he was already aware of all these images, and just so in the sense that, for instance, when he was sick, he said to his doctor, for instance, that he had the feeling that a serpent was eating his stomach from the inside. Like, you see that sort of analogies and sort of crazy ass metaphors and stuff, sort of shamanic archetypical stuff, words. That's like what intuitives can use, but that's really that's really what the unconscious is for Jung. Yeah, I'm going on way too much tangents myself. But yeah, the point was that you're just very unconscious. You're just very ignorant, actually. Every one of you. You think that you know a lot, but you don't know shit. No, I'm kidding. But what I really wanted to say, actually, so was that um, there is just merely it is just merely thinkable, imaginable, that there's always stuff that you don't know. And like, for instance, when you're talking to some stranger on the street, or even the your best acquaintance, even, you know that you are not that person, right? Because, for instance, that person has yesterday gone to a pub where you did not go, and he is explaining the how he fixed this girl and stuff, and it is just for you to assume that it's all true, and right. But yeah, you don't know anything of what he's saying, right? You don't know whether it's true. You really then need to verify it if you really want to know whether your friend of yours have fixed some girl, right? But you get the idea. Yeah, and I'm really diving really deep in my essay into this nothingness. Uh, so, and how you're really just very unconscious, unknowing, how you're just very ignorant, actually, of everything thinkable, uh, and that actually that is what makes you knowledgeable, and sort of, yeah, even peaceful. Uh, Peaceful, because if you do not think about tomorrow, you do not think about yesterday, you're not obsessing over that girl of your friend, right? And you're not ruminating and overthinking about geopolitics. That is peace. And with that, I would like to end this video. Thank you for watching. If you're still watching, I can't almost imagine that someone is still watching, but I hope some wizard is. Thank you. Have a good day, evening, whatever. I hope this was enlightening to some extent. Tot de volgende. Hoe.